Captain Isabella Ray sat in the dimly lit conference room aboard the Indomitable, the flagship of the United Earth Fleet. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant presence, almost drowned out by the voices echoing around the room. She ran her fingers through her dark, sweat-slicked hair, staring at the holographic display in front of her. On the projection, a cluster of alien ambassadors, their forms a mixture of soft blues, sharp greens, and shimmering golds, stood silent. Every species represented had been contacted in the last few days, and yet none of them had agreed to undertake the mission. The message was clear. None of them were willing to risk their resources, their soldiers, or their pride. The galaxy was at war, again, and this time, the enemy was something new, something ancient and deadly. Ray tapped her finger on the hologram's interface. "None of you have agreed to even discuss the mission?" she asked, her voice calm yet piercing. She kept her eyes fixed on the screen, unwavering. The silence that followed was thick with tension. An alien with translucent wings, Captain Threll of the Zinthari, finally spoke. His voice was melodic, but there was a coldness to it. "We do not intend to put our forces in harm's way for this. The Earthlings are too fragile for such a task." Ray's lip curled into a thin, knowing smile. "You were quick to call us fragile when you needed our resources in the last war," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. The Zinthari recoiled slightly, but no one said anything. The meeting room grew tense as representatives from the other species exchanged uneasy glances. Ray had seen it all before. The Alliance was always like this, content to bicker and avoid hard decisions. The galaxy had been silent in the face of the dark threat approaching them, a malevolent force that could wipe out entire civilizations. They had refused to act. But not her. Ray stood from her seat and walked slowly toward the front of the room. "So let me get this straight," she said, her voice louder now, echoing off the walls. "You would rather sit here and wait for this thing to reach us? You'd rather let billions die than risk your own forces? This is how it's going to end." The room was still. The silence was deafening. Her gaze shifted to the final member of the council, the one who had remained silent the entire meeting, Zalran, the towering, spiny-skinned leader of the Dalathari. His people were famous for their strength and stoicism, yet he remained unmoved, unreadable. Isabella paused, then finally turned back to the screen. "Fine. If none of you are willing to step up, then I'll do it myself." A ripple of disbelief went through the council. Several aliens spoke over each other, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. "Captain Ray, you can't be serious. Earth alone against this enemy? You'll be slaughtered. You don't have the resources. You don't even have a full fleet." She met each statement with a look of cold defiance. "You all seem to forget that the humans have a habit of doing the impossible." The room fell silent once again, but this time, Ray could feel the weight of their disbelief shift. The unspoken truth hung in the air. Humans had done the impossible before, time and time again. It was their nature, something that could never be snuffed out, no matter how many times they were told they weren't strong enough, fast enough, or smart enough. "I'm going to take the fleet," Ray said, her voice unwavering. "And I'm going to stop this thing, whether you like it or not." Zalran's deep voice echoed across the room. "You do realize what you're asking for? You'd be going into the unknown. The enemy isn't just another warlord or empire. This is an ancient force that's come from beyond the stars. It devours civilizations whole." Isabella nodded. "And that's why we have to act now. I'll gather the best we have, but I need you to give me your support. Or stand aside." There was a brief silence before the Dalathari leader finally spoke, his voice measured. "You think you can do this alone? You have no idea what you're up against." Ray met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't need to know everything. I just need to know that no one else has the guts to do it." She turned her back to the council and began to pace, her boots clicking against the metal floor. "If you won't help, that's fine. But don't expect me to beg. I'm asking you for the last time, will you help me stop this threat before it destroys us all?" Her words cut through the tension in the room. The silence was pregnant with uncertainty, but in her chest, Isabella felt nothing but resolve. She was done negotiating. This was it, the final stand. The galaxy was unwilling to step up, but she would. Ray paused, her fingers brushing against the console as the council murmured behind her. She didn't need their help. Not really. She had everything she needed, the will to fight and the heart of humanity that never backed down. The Zinthri captain was the first to speak, though his voice was soft and reluctant. We'll give you some resources. We won't fight alongside you, but we can spare a few ships. That's not enough, Isabella shot back. Not even close. The alien leaders were quiet, avoiding her gaze. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Humans weren't known for waiting for permission. I don't need your ships. I'll take my chances with what we've got, she declared. Her eyes were fierce now, glimmering with the intensity of the moment. But mark my words, the Earth will fight. We always fight. Her declaration echoed in the hollow silence of the room. She turned, striding towards the exit. I'll send a report to Earth. You can watch from the sidelines. We'll see who's left standing when this is all over. With that, she left the conference room, her mind already spinning plans. They didn't know it yet, but the universe would soon learn the cost of underestimating humanity. The corridors of the Indomitable were quiet, the soft hum of the ship's engines the only sound as Captain Isabella Ray made her way to the command bridge. The crew knew their mission, but none of them had expected to be thrust into the unknown so quickly. They had watched the galaxy's greatest minds and fiercest warriors back away from the threat, a force that consumed entire planets without mercy, and now it was up to humans to save them all. Isabella's mind raced as she walked. She had been told the best minds and fleets in the galaxy would back down from this mission. Earth, small in comparison, was seen as a species too young to take on such a fight. They were too naive, too reckless. But in every misstep, humanity had risen. It wasn't the number of ships or the size of the arsenal. It was the one thing that had always made humans different, their ability to face the impossible and somehow make it through. She entered the command bridge, the quiet hum of activity stopping for a moment as the crew straightened in acknowledgement. She nodded at them, but her focus was elsewhere. Status report, she said, her voice calm but firm. Captain. Lieutenant Aria Kessel responded from her station, a look of wariness in her eyes. We've finished gathering all available data on the enemy. It's as bad as the Council said. The Devourers, these ancient beings, have wiped out countless civilizations. They move quickly, silently, and devour entire systems. They don't even need to fight to win, they just consume. Isabella looked at the holographic display. A swirling mass of deep black and glowing purple, the enemy was a monstrous form, impossible to fully comprehend, shifting in and out of dimensions as though it were part of the very fabric of space. There were no strategic weaknesses. No known defense against it. Do we have any idea how to fight them? Isabella asked, voice almost a whisper. Mara hesitated. None. But we're assembling the best we have for the mission. The Indomitable is our flagship. We've got a few other ships with us, volunteers mostly. But we're not ready, Captain. No one is. Isabella walked to the viewport, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars looked cold, indifferent. We'll have to make do, she said, voice resolute. It's all we've got. We're out there on our own. Her hand rested on the console, fingers brushing over the edge, as if the ship's technology could somehow give her the answers she needed. There were none, of course. Just the silence of the endless space beyond. And the knowledge that, for the first time, the universe was going to learn what it meant to face humanity. Captain, incoming transmission, the communications officer called out. Isabella turned, her brow furrowing. Who would be contacting them at this point? Put it through, she said, and a holographic image of a familiar face appeared on the central screen. Captain Ray. General Hadrian Juno's voice boomed through the room, his broad frame filling the image. He was one of Earth's finest military leaders, his calm exterior hiding a mind that was always calculating, always planning. What do you have for me, General? Isabella asked, crossing her arms. I've just received word from the home front, Juno said, his expression grim. There's a situation. Tell me, she replied, her pulse quickening. The threat, these devourers, they've begun to move faster than we anticipated. They've already consumed 2 systems. Their advance is outpacing even our worst estimates. Isabella's jaw tightened. The urgency of it was sinking in, and for the first time, doubt gnawed at the edges of her confidence. But she quickly suppressed it. There was no time for fear. Then we move faster, she said, standing straighter, the weight of leadership settling onto her shoulders once again. I'll make preparations to leave immediately. Captain, I don't have to tell you how dangerous this is, Juno warned. You're going into the heart of darkness. No one's coming back from this without a fight. General. Isabella's tone shifted, sharp and focused. We're already on our way. The transmission cut, and the room fell back into quiet tension. There was no more time for deliberation. Isabella knew the risks. She had seen the horror of the enemy in the reports. But even so, there was no other option. She wasn't going to let the galaxy burn because everyone else had backed down. Not when humans were capable of so much more. All hands! Isabella's voice rang out over the ship's intercom. Prepare for departure. Set course for the enemy's last known location. We're going in. The crew went into motion, each member moving with precision. No one spoke, but their actions spoke volumes. The weight of the task was clear to them all. But humans didn't back down, and they didn't falter in the face of overwhelming odds. As the Indomitable began to shift from its dock, moving through space like a predator on the hunt, Isabella felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't alone. The crew of the Indomitable, humans, the most underestimated species in the galaxy, had stood up, willing to face the impossible. Mara walked up beside her, her face pale but determined. Captain, we're in position. We'll be entering the enemy's range soon. Isabella nodded, eyes fixed on the view of space ahead of her. Then let's show them why they should never have underestimated us. A voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we've just detected an anomaly. Something's moving fast. It's not one of our ships. Bring it up on screen, Isabella ordered. A sudden, cold chill ran down her spine as the image of a black, swirling mass appeared on the screen. The Devourer's form pulsed with dark energy, unlike anything she'd seen before. It was massive, immeasurably so, and yet, somehow, still only a part of the true threat. All systems are ready, Mara said, her voice laced with both fear and resolve. We'll make it, Isabella said quietly. We're humans. We don't know how to quit. And with that, the Indomitable surged forward, plunging into the abyss where the universe's darkest nightmare awaited. The Indomitable shuddered as it passed the outer boundary of the system. The space around them was silent, almost unnervingly so, with only the occasional flicker of distant stars cutting through the darkness. Inside the ship, the air was thick with anticipation. Crew members worked at their stations in a tense, synchronized rhythm. No one spoke, but every movement was filled with purpose. They were preparing for a battle unlike any they had ever faced, one that could very well be their last. Captain Isabella Ray stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the front viewport. The mass of the Devourer was growing larger on the monitor, its shape still too incomprehensible to fully grasp. It seemed less like a ship and more like an entity, a living thing with tendrils that reached out into space like dark fingers, pulling the very fabric of reality with it. Captain, Lieutenant Aria Kessel said from her post. We've received a message from Earth Command. They're urging us to pull back, stating that we've already exceeded our mission parameters. They think we're walking into a trap. Isabella clenched her jaw, her fingers gripping the armrest of her chair. Tell them, she said quietly, that we're already too far in to back out now. Mara hesitated but nodded, sending the communication. The ship vibrated slightly, and the holographic display flickered. Captain, Lieutenant Colin Markov called out from the sensor station. The Devourer is no longer moving in a straight line. It's splitting. Splitting? Isabella repeated, turning her gaze sharply toward him. Explain. The screen shifted, showing the vastness of the approaching anomaly. The black mass was not just growing, it was fragmenting into several smaller shapes, each one more dangerous than the last. Each fragment glowed with eerie violet energy, pulsing like a heartbeat. They're breaking into smaller segments, Colin said, his voice tight. And they're all heading directly toward us. Isabella's mind raced. The Devourer wasn't just a single force, they were dealing with a swarm of interconnected, malevolent entities, each one more insidious than the last. It was no longer just a matter of firepower, it was a question of survival. All hands, she said, standing and moving toward the command center's central console. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Increase power to shields. Full forward thrust now. The ship groaned under the strain as the Indomitable surged forward. The Devourer's fragments were closing in, faster than any of them had expected. We're not going to outrun them, Mara said, her eyes scanning the monitors. The fragments are too fast. They'll catch us in minutes. Then we fight, Isabella said. This is where we make our stand. The crew braced themselves as the ship entered the heart of the swarm. The Indomitable rocked violently as the first fragment made contact, its tendrils scraping against the shields. The ship shook, sending a jolt of fear through the crew. But Isabella remained steady, her voice cutting through the chaos. Target the largest fragment first. We take down the head, and the rest will follow. Energy blasts fired from the ship's cannons, striking the black mass with pinpoint accuracy. The first shot hit the Devourer's central mass, creating a flash of violet light. But the damage was minimal. The shields were strong, but the Devourer was resilient, its body seemingly impervious to standard weaponry. Shields at 70%! Mara shouted over the comms. Hold it together, Isabella snapped. We're not going down yet. The crew continued to fire, but the Devourer's tendrils were relentless, lashing out, attacking from all angles. The ship groaned again as the fragments seemed to multiply, splitting and shifting as if they were alive, adapting to their attacks. We need something stronger, Colin said, his voice shaking as he monitored the damage reports. The standard lasers are barely making a dent. We can't keep this up much longer. Isabella's mind raced. The Indomitable was strong, but it wasn't invincible. She had seen the damage reports, and the shields were already weakening faster than they could recharge. Activate the reserve weapon systems, she ordered, her voice grim. All hands brace for impact. This is it. The command center fell into a tense silence as the crew prepared for their last-ditch effort. The reserve weapon was a classified experimental system, one that had never been tested in battle. It was their last hope. If it didn't work, they would all be dead. We're firing on my mark, Isabella said, her voice steady. Get ready. The ship's power thrummed as the experimental weapon powered up. The Devourer's fragments closed in, and Isabella's heart raced. It was now or never. Mark! She shouted. A beam of raw energy shot from the Indomitable, a blinding white light that collided with the largest fragment. The impact was catastrophic. For a moment, the Devourer seemed to freeze, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the destruction. The black mass shattered like glass, splintering into millions of shards, each one vanishing into the dark expanse of space. The energy of the beam continued to ripple through the fragments, disintegrating them one by one. But it wasn't over. The last fragment, the one that had been the center of the mass, remained. It was much larger than the others, and it was moving toward the ship at breakneck speed. The Indomitable shields flickered, but they weren't strong enough to withstand another direct hit. Captain, we can't. Mara's voice faltered. Isabella stood tall, her eyes narrowed. We can, she said simply, gripping the command console with both hands. We will. A final, desperate shot was fired from the reserve weapon, but this time, it wasn't aimed at the fragment. It was aimed at the heart of the ship's core, using the blast's final remnants to propel them forward. The ship lurched, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything was going to collapse in on itself. The Indomitable slammed into the Devourer's last fragment, the two forces colliding in a brutal, violent clash. The shields held for a moment longer, but it was clear, it was the end. The Devourer was defeated, but at what cost? "Prepare for emergency evacuation," Isabella ordered, knowing the ship was beyond repair. But as the ship's lights flickered and the screens began to fail, one thing was clear: humanity had not only survived, against all odds, they had triumphed. And the galaxy would never forget it. The Indomitable drifted, a battered and broken hulk, its systems failing one by one. The battle had been fierce, too fierce. Yet, against all expectations, they had done the impossible. The Devourers were no more, reduced to stardust and void, swallowed up by the very thing they had tried to devour. Isabella Ray stood amidst the chaos on the command bridge, watching as the last of the ship's exterior lights flickered out. The pain in her chest wasn't just from the damage to the ship. It was the weight of the lives lost, the sacrifices made. The faces of the crew, those who had stood with her until the very end, flashed in her mind. But there was no time to mourn, not yet. "Captain, the reserve systems are down." Aria Kessler's voice rang out from the console, a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We're on emergency power now. Hull integrity at 30%. We can't hold out for much longer." "Is the message sent to Earth Command?" Isabella asked, her voice tight. "Yes," Mara replied, glancing at the flickering comm panel. "But there's still no response. They don't know what to make of it. We've been cut off from all channels. It's like they're waiting for the official report before acknowledging us." Isabella's jaw clenched. Earth Command had been slow to act, hesitant to send reinforcements, unwilling to fully back her mission. But now, there was no denying it, humanity had proven itself. She had led them to victory, not just against a physical enemy, but against the galaxy's perception of humanity's limits. "Keep trying," she ordered. "We need to get this message out. Let them know what we've done." The silence that followed was unbearable. No one on the bridge spoke. They were all too aware of the consequences, the harsh reality they had just survived. Suddenly, the comms officer turned, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Captain, you need to see this." Isabella followed him to the console, her heart pounding. The image on the screen was familiar, stars, endless and cold. But there was something different now. A pulse of energy, like a heartbeat, was rippling through space. It was distant at first, then growing. A vast wave of light, slowly expanding, seemingly radiating from the core of the now defeated Devourer. "What the hell is that?" Colin Markov muttered, his fingers flying over his console. "Can you identify it?" Isabella asked, her tone sharp. "It's impossible," Colin said, his voice trembling. "It's not coming from the Devourer itself. But somehow, it's connected to it. It's like the Devourer's energy is still alive, pulsing, feeding. But from where?" The ship groaned under the strain as they all watched, unable to look away from the growing energy field. For a moment, the pulse stabilized, as though it were waiting, watching, calculating. "We need to leave," Mara said, her voice urgent. "This thing, it's still out there, and it's learning. We can't stay here." But Isabella held her ground, her eyes fixed on the screen. The energy pulse felt different, almost sentient. Something more. They had killed the physical form of the Devourer. But what if it wasn't just a creature? What if it was something far more dangerous, a consciousness, a collective mind extending its reach? "We can't leave just yet," Isabella said, her voice resolute. "I need to know what this is." "We're already running out of time," Mara insisted. "If this thing is still alive, we need to regroup. The Indomitable can't take any more hits. The Devourer's consciousness, or whatever it is, it'll find us." But Isabella stood still, her gaze unwavering. "No. We've come this far. We've defeated them. Now we need to make sure it's gone for good. This pulse, it's trying to adapt. We need to understand it before it can spread again." Before anyone could protest, the ship's systems flared to life. The console lights blinked on in rapid succession, and the navigation systems hummed as if something were forcing its way into the ship's controls. Then the voice came. It wasn't human, but it wasn't alien either. It was a deep, resonating sound, like the vibration of 1,000 voices, each one indistinguishable from the next. You cannot destroy what was never meant to die. We will return. The words echoed through the bridge, shaking the crew to their core. For a split second, the pulse of energy intensified, then it stopped, almost as if it had never been there. The room fell silent, everyone frozen, processing what had just happened. Isabella's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel her pulse racing, the blood rushing to her ears. The words from the entity, it wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. Something far more insidious than they had originally understood was still out there. The Devourers were not just a race of monsters, not just an enemy to be wiped out. They were something more, a collective consciousness that had learned to survive across time and space. This is not over, Isabella whispered, the weight of the revelation sinking in. We've only seen the beginning. Mara exchanged a glance with Colin. Captain, we're losing power. The pulse, it's draining our systems. Isabella's gaze locked with her crew. They had fought hard, lost so many, and survived against all odds. But now they were facing something new. The war wasn't just with creatures from beyond. They were dealing with an ancient force, a mind that had been left behind in the wake of the Devourer's destruction. We're not done yet, Isabella said, her voice firm. Get the message out. We'll warn them all, but we can't leave. We need to find the source of that pulse. The crew nodded, each one of them carrying the weight of the mission, of the impossible odds they had already defied. Isabella knew the stakes. Earth, the galaxy, everything they had fought for, was at risk. But this fight was far from over. She wasn't going to let this new enemy slip through their fingers. The stars outside the indomitable viewport stretched into streaks as the ship moved forward, deeper into the unknown. There would be no turning back. Not now. Not ever. They would face the unknown, and they would fight until there was nothing left but victory, or ashes. And for the first time in her life, Isabella was certain of one thing: humanity would be the ones to write the final chapter.